believe the best stories are not just written down, they're cooked. Every city has its rivalries. In New York, it's Mets or Yankees. In Chicago, it's deep dish or thin crust. And in Philadelphia, it's Pat's or Geno's. On South Ninth Street in Philadelphia, two neon lit corners face each other like culinary gladiators. On one side, Pat's King of Steaks, founded in 1930. On the other, Geno's, flashy and defiant since 1966, each claiming to make the original the best, the only cheesesteak worth the name. And it made me wonder, when we pick a side in a food rivalry, are we really just choosing a sandwich, or are we choosing who we want to be? I'm Jeannie Joe, and this is Food and the Story, where the best stories are always cooked before they're told. The cheesesteak begins humbly, like so many iconic dishes. In 1930, Pat Olivery, a South Philly hot dog vendor, decided to toss some thinly sliced beef on his grill for lunch. He added grilled onions and tucked it into an Italian roll. A passing cab driver smelled it, asked for one, and spread the word. Soon, Pat's hot dog cart had transformed into Pat's King of Steaks. At first, there was no cheese, just beef, onions, and bread. The cheese came later, most likely in the 1940s or 50s. The legend goes that Cocky Joe Lorenza, a manager at Pat's, added provolone one day, and the cheesesteak as we know it was born. Then came the competition. In 1966, across the intersection, Joey Vento opened Geno's Steaks. He built it into a neon landmark, glowing signs, brash branding, and a commitment to serving his version of the cheesesteak. Thinly sliced ribeye, provolone or whiz, onions optional. Pat's had history, Geno's had flash. Over the decades, rivalry became part of Philly itself. Locals argued about whose was better, while tourists lined up for both, sometimes eating Pat's one night and Geno's the next. But the cheesesteak story isn't just about two restaurants. It's about South Philly's immigrant neighborhoods, Italian, Irish, and Jewish, where bread was soft and plentiful, beef was sliced thin to stretch it further, and onions were cheap and filling. It's about food as survival, then pride, then identity. By the 1980s, the cheesesteak had left Philly, showing up in ballparks, chain restaurants, and frozen food aisles. But the real thing, greasy, hot, messy, best eaten with two hands and a pile of napkins, still belonged to Philadelphia. There are some foods you think you know until you really look at where they come from. I thought I knew cheesesteaks. I had versions at food courts, in ballparks, even a frozen knockoff or two. But reading about Philly, listening to the locals talk, and watching the way those sandwiches get piled high on sizzling grills, I realized the cheesesteak isn't a sandwich, it's a performance. Picture it. You're standing on South Ninth Street, neon glowing against the night. The line snakes down the block, and the air is thick with the smell of onions caramelizing on a hot griddle. Inside the stand, meat is chopped furiously with spatulas, the rhythm as steady as a drumbeat. Rolls are split, cheese is spread or melted, orders are shouted in language of their own. Whiz wit, provolone wit out. And here's the thing, you can't hesitate. In Philly, you order fast, you order right, and you know the code. It's less about the sandwich in your hands and more about whether you know how to belong in the moment. It made me think back to Wrigley Field this summer, where I ate a Chicago dog with mustard, relish, onions, tomato wedges, a pickle spear, sport peppers, and that unshakable rule, absolutely no ketchup. In Chicago, the hot dog is identity on a bun. In Philadelphia, the cheesesteak is identity on a roll. Both cities guard their food rules with a kind of fierce pride, as if breaking them would unravel something deeper. And then I thought of my own family. We had our own unspoken rules too. Maybe not no ketchup, but things like bread always on the table, dessert only after dinner, and absolutely no wasting food. These rules were not about taste as much as they were about identity, who we were, how we showed up together. Maybe Philly's cheesesteak code is the same. It's not just about beef, onions, and cheese. It's about loyalty, about rhythm, about belonging to a story that started long before you stepped up to the counter. So, how do you bring this South Philly legend into your own kitchen? The good news is it's really simple. You only need a handful of ingredients, and if you take your time, you'll understand why the sandwich matters. Here's what you'll need: about a pound of ribeye steak, sliced very thin. It helps to freeze it for about a half an hour first so you can cut those paper thin slices. You'll also need 2 tablespoons of oil. Nothing fancy. Canola or vegetable works fine. 1 big yellow onion. 4 Amoroso hoagie rolls, or something close. Soft Italian rolls are the best stand-in. Then your cheese. Provolone, Cheese Whiz, or American. And yes, there are purists who will argue this all night long. Season it with both kosher salt and freshly ground black pepper. Now, here's what you're going to do. You're going to start with the rolls. Split them open, leave one side attached, warm them in a low oven, just about 200 degrees, so they are soft and ready. While they're warming, heat a little oil in a skillet and toss in the onions. Let them cook low and slow until they're soft and golden, about 10 minutes. Take them out and set them aside. Next, the steak. Add the rest of the oil into the pan. Crank up the heat and toss in your thin slices of ribeye. Season with both salt and pepper. Use your spatula to chop and move the beef around as it cooks. Just a couple of minutes until it's browned and tender. Then mix the onions back in. Now comes the cheese. If you're using provolone or American, lay the slices right over the hot beef and cover the pan so it melts. If you're going to use the whiz, spread it inside the warm rolls before you add the meat. Last step, time to assemble. You're going to pile the beef and onion mixture into the rolls. Let the cheese ooze around it and serve hot. Use both hands and have napkins ready. A few tips. The bread really matters, so go for something soft and squishy if you can't find Amoroso. Cheese is always a debate, but don't ever use Swiss. And remember the lingo. Wit means onions, without means no onions. And when you take that first bite, you will understand. It's not just about beef and cheese. It's South Philly in your hands, immigrant grit, neighborhood pride, and rivalry cooked into every roll. Food rivalries are not really about food. They're about belonging. At Pat and Gino's, you're not just eating a sandwich. You're declaring loyalty, choosing a side, and becoming part of a story bigger than yourself. And in Philadelphia, that story is one of resilience. A city that built America, that carried its industries and its immigrants, that held onto pride even when the world seemed to forget. So I imagine standing there, South 9th Street in Philadelphia, with a cheesesteak in hand, cheese clinging to my fingers, onions sweet on my tongue. I can't help but wonder, maybe the cheesesteak isn't about which side of the street you're standing on. Maybe it's about the fact that you're standing in Philadelphia, holding history in your hands. And as I think back on where we've been so far, I see a pattern. In Houston, fajitas began as survival, a widow at a grill turning necessity into a legacy. In Chicago, the hot dog becoming pride, a garden on a bun that said, "This is who we are." And in Philadelphia, the cheesesteak turned into rivalry, a roll stuffed not just with beef and cheese, but with loyalty and belonging. Survival, pride, rivalry. 3 different cities, 3 different dishes, but all reminding me that food is never just about eating. It's about who we are, how we endure, and the stories we tell in every bite. Every food has its story, and this one's ready for seconds. I'm Jeannie Joe, and this has been Food and the Story. If you liked today's episode, give it a like, a share, or a subscribe, and come back next Wednesday when we will head to New Orleans, where gumbo stirs together centuries of flavor and culture. Until then, keep cooking, keep tasting, and keep telling the stories that matter.